Hey folks, before we roll into tonight's story, I want to take a moment to dedicate this intro to Mark Nichols. Most of you know him as Hobo Shoestring. He was a true legend of the rails, a storyteller, and a spirit who rode high and wide. This one's for you, Shoestring. May the trains always run smooth where you are, brother. I can't stop thinking about it. No matter how far I drive, no matter how many hours of country road or blacktop rattle beneath these borrowed tires, the guilt just doesn't loosen its grip. I got one of my best friends killed. Sometimes, in the hush between engine sputters and distant wind, I can almost hear Josh's laugh or feel the ghost of his hand on my shoulder, telling me it wasn't all my fault. I wish I could believe him. I don't even know what was wrong with me. Back at the peaking, the rage and confusion, the voices in my head, was it the stress, the hunger, or maybe I'm just broken in a way you don't come back from? That thought sticks to my ribs more than the cold. And every time I look at my right hand, now healed up ugly and stiff, the memory comes roaring back. After Josh died, I just kept driving. Didn't talk, didn't think, just drove. I lost track of the days. Somewhere along the back roads, I passed a half-burnt Dollar General, a fallen water tower, fields that had grown wild and choked with thorn. It wasn't until the gas needle dipped below empty that I realized how far I'd come. Now it's been a week. I'm camped beside a remote line of rusted CSX boxcars, maybe 10 miles out from any town, just south of the Wayne National Forest in Ohio. The tracks here cut through the heart of nowhere. No cars, no voices, nothing but endless forest, fog, and the dull clank of metal settling in the cool morning air. I sleep in one of the abandoned cars, windows broken out, weeds growing up through the floor. At night, I listen for footsteps, for the low, hungry groans of the dead, but it's just the wind most nights. Sometimes, when I get lucky, I find a can of beans, a broken pack of crackers, or even a forgotten magazine stashed by whoever came before. The hand aches in the cold, the scars ridged and angry, but it works well enough. I wrap it up tight in duct tape, try not to look too long at the place where my fingers used to be. I don't know how long I'll stay here. Maybe until the trains run again, or until the world gives me a reason to keep going. For now, it's just me, the rails, and the silence, trying to outrun the past, and not sure if I ever really can. A week out here by the rails, and you start to spot the difference between the old world's junk and another survivor's handiwork. The second morning, just as the sun was cutting through the fog, I followed the tracks a little farther north, boots crunching gravel. There, on the battered blue side of a CSX boxcar, was a faded bit of graffiti, done with a practiced hand. Big, blocky letters that spelled out Shoestring. A tiny, faded red bandana was knotted to the brake wheel, fluttering in the breeze. Something about it made me pause. I'd seen a lot of tags, but nothing quite like this. Right below the tag, tucked half under a loose railroad tie, was a small canvas sack, tied with a bit of old shoelace. Inside, a life straw still in its wrapper, a roll-up solar panel, a Ziploc of adapters and a little USB fan, and, maybe the best thing, a battered but working wind-up flashlight. Tucked in the corner was a worn steel railroad spike, polished smooth on one end. I turned it over in my palm. "Someone left you on purpose, didn't they?" I said quietly, like I expected the spike to answer. I held up the little bandana, sunlight catching the worn red pattern, and tied it around my wrist. "Maybe for luck. Whoever you were, Shoestring," I said, running my fingers over the tag. "Bet you rode high and wide, saw the whole country before the world shut down. Hell, you might have slept right here, listening to trains, eating cold beans, waiting for the next ride." I didn't know the man, but the way the supplies were packed, clean, neat, like he expected someone who needed them to find them, told me he was the kind that looked out for others, even if he never met them. I set up the solar panel and leaned the spike up on the car's coupler, like a totem. Maybe someone else will see it and know a legend passed through. When the day's quiet, sometimes you can almost feel the old stories in the rails. I sat a while longer, the wind picking at the bandana, the fan spinning softly in my hand, and thought about the kind of person who leaves the world just a little better than they found it. If there's still such a thing as luck, I hope Shoestring rides high and wide, wherever he is. After a while, I tied the polished railroad spike onto the same chain as Josh's dog tag, letting them clink together softly against my chest. It felt right, one for the friend I'd lost, and one for the legend I'd never meet. Maybe it was a superstition, maybe just the way we keep the memories of others close in a world like this. The sun was higher now, burning the mist off the tracks. I was fiddling with the solar panel, trying to coax out a little more juice for my battered phone, when I heard footsteps crunching in the gravel. Instinct had me reaching for my sidearm, but the shape that emerged from between the cars wasn't threatening at all. He was older, gray-bearded, lines worn deep into his face, eyes that had seen more than a few lifetimes. His clothes were patched and faded, boots scuffed, and his battered hat sat at a familiar tilt, shadowing his friendly grin. He moved easy for a man his age, like the rails were home. He stopped a good 10 feet away and gave a casual little wave, taking me in with a glance that felt both gentle and sharp. "Don't worry, I'm not Shoestring," he said, voice warm and a little rough around the edges. "And those supplies ain't mine, though I wish they were. Looks like someone with a good heart wanted 'em found." I nodded, still cautious. "You from around here?" "Here, there, everywhere," he chuckled. "Been on these rails longer than most folks been alive. Seen wars, floods, and a couple of near apocalypses before this one even got started. This one's bad, sure, but it's just another storm to ride out. Name's Mac." He tipped his hat. "And I could use a friend, if you don't mind the company." There was something steady about him, an old hobo's peace, like nothing could shake him for long. We sat together in the shade of the boxcar, passing a can of beans back and forth, talking about the old world and the strange, broken beauty of the new one. He never pushed for my story, just listened, nodding in all the right places, and sometimes letting a quiet smile tell me more than words ever could. When the sun dipped low and the rails hummed with the ghosts of trains gone by, I realized I hadn't felt this safe in a long, long time. Mac led me down the line to his own little corner of the world. A boxcar set up with a rough bedroll, a coffee can full of cigarette butts, and a battered milk crate packed with odds and ends. A pair of old boots, a cracked thermos, a faded playing card stuck in the slats. It looked rough, but it was clean, lived in, and oddly welcoming. He dug through his stash and came up with a dented, sun-bleached can of Coors Banquet, probably expired before the world fell apart. He grinned, wiped it with his sleeve, and handed it over. "Don't worry, I drank worse than this riding east out of Cheyenne in '89. Only thing it'll kill is your sense of taste." I laughed for the first time in a long while and cracked it open. Fizzed weakly, but it was cold, and for a second I forgot about the scars on my hand or the ache in my chest. We sat on the open door, legs swinging over the empty tracks, sharing the can and letting the breeze roll through. "So," Max said, looking out at the sea of green and rust, "what brings a young fella like you all the way out to no man's land?" I thought about lying, but his eyes said he'd know. So I told him the truth. About the group, the siege at the Peking, what happened to Josh, and the mess I made of things. I just kept driving. When the gas ran out, I started walking. Couldn't face anyone. Couldn't face myself most days. Figured the tracks were as good a place as any to hide out. He nodded, no judgment. "I get it. My last camp went up in smoke a couple weeks ago. Bandits, same as everywhere. Spent years on the rails before things went bad, drifting from state to state. Wasn't much, but I had my routine, my routes, my folks I'd see at the yards. Most of them are gone now, one way or another. Figured if the world was ending, I'd rather see it out here than in a city." He took a sip, then added quietly, "Lost a lot of friends in a lot of storms. Some folks are gone, some are just lost. Either way, the tracks keep rolling, and so do I." The quiet after was comfortable. Just the click of the rails cooling, the sun dipping behind the trees, and the sound of two people, strangers by chance, sharing the last of the good things. For a little while, I almost believed the world could be kind again. The can of Coors was nearly empty. We passed it back and forth until Max squeezed the last sip into his mouth, then crushed the can and tossed it into a plastic sack tied to a nail inside the boxcar. Outside, Dusk crept in slow, painting the old tracks and the weedy field gold and purple. The world was quiet in a way that was both peaceful and a little bit haunted. Mac fished a battered harmonica out of his pocket, turning it in his hands. "Mind some music?" he asked. Without waiting for a reply, he put it to his lips and played a slow, mournful tune, a railroad lullaby, the kind you'd hear in a storybook. The sound floated over the rails, echoing into the emptiness. It made the boxcar feel a little less empty. I leaned back, watching as a couple of crows landed on a power line, curious but wary. I could smell the faint metallic tang of old beer and sweat, and for the first time in days, my shoulders relaxed. The railroad spike and Josh's dog tag thumped against my chest as I breathed in the evening air. Night came quickly. We lit a single stormproof candle and set it between us, the little flame fighting off the darkness just enough to see Mac's face. I asked him, "You think anyone else is out there? Or is it just us and the birds?" He nodded toward the woods. "I figure there's always someone moving, even if you never see him. Seen footprints a few miles up, around the old water tower. Sometimes, if the wind's right, you can hear voices drifting through the trees. Could be living, could be ghosts. These days, who's to say the difference?" For a while, we sat in silence, just listening. Rails creaking, a distant dog barking, wind whispering through the grass. Then, somewhere down the line, a faint light flickered. Could have been fire or a flashlight, maybe even just lightning bugs, but it was enough to put us on edge. Mac went quiet, his easy manner sharpening. He reached behind a loose board and pulled out a battered single-shot .22, checked the chamber, and nodded at me. "You get any sleep you can, kid. I'll keep first watch. Out here, the rules are simple. Listen more than you talk, and never trust a light that moves when it shouldn't." I lay down, head on my pack, and pulled my blanket over my shoulders. The harmonica tune lingered in my ears. I watched the flicker of the candle and listened to the night. Mac was right. Out here, the rails never sleep. Maybe that meant I shouldn't either. But for now, just for tonight, I felt like I belonged somewhere again. Dawn came slow, gray, and cold. I woke to the clatter of Mac fiddling with a dented percolator over a little alcohol burner, the faint smell of instant coffee curling through the boxcar. He handed me a tin cup, half full and barely warm, but after a week of creek water, it tasted like heaven. "Come on," he said, shouldering his pack. "Let me show you something." We wandered down the gravel, dew soaking my boots, until we reached the end of the train. The last few cars had left the rails, one lying half-twisted over the embankment. Under the jagged edge of the wreck was a walker, flattened at the waist, arms dragging. It was pitiful, if anything. The thing made soft, gurgling noises and blinked against the morning light. Mac squatted down near the thing and tossed it a half-stale crust of bread. "There you go, Earl," he muttered. "Ain't much, but you still got a bite left in ya." I stared, eyebrows raised. "You named it." Mac shrugged, not looking away from the walker. "Don't judge me, kid. I ain't had real company in longer than I care to count. He don't nip at me no more, but I don't know if he'll nip at you. So keep your distance." He stood and dusted off his hands. Without another word, Mac walked up to the coupling on the last derailed car and, with a grunt, uncoupled it from the rest. The wrecked car groaned, shifting in the dirt, leaving the train with just the cab and 4 solid boxcars. Mac looked back at me, eyes twinkling. "Follow me. I want to try something." He climbed into the old locomotive's cab, whistling tunelessly. Inside, he started pushing buttons and pulling levers, muttering to himself about old engines and lost timetables. I stood in the doorway, coffee cup in hand, watching him bring the past back to life, if only for a moment. "Never hurts to try," Max said with a wink. "Even if you don't know what the hell you're doing. That's the secret to getting by out here." The dawn light caught the rails just right, stretching out in 2 endless silver lines. For the first time in days, I wondered if maybe, just maybe, there was still somewhere worth going. I watched Mac fiddle with the levers and buttons, most of them coated in dust and grime, the faded labels almost unreadable. "Do you actually know what you're doing?" I asked, half smiling but not entirely joking. Mac grinned, eyes crinkling at the corners. Not really, kid. Used to ride him, never drove him. But how hard can it be? Ain't no traffic laws out here anymore. He paused, staring at a huge red button on the console. Figure it can't hurt to try. He slammed his palm down on it. For a second, nothing happened. Then the engine gave a cough, then another, and suddenly roared to life. Diesel thunder echoing across the empty fields. Dust and old leaves rattled off the metal. Even the birds scattered. I laughed, the sound equal parts relief and disbelief. Guess we're not dead yet. Mac chuckled, hands dancing over the controls like a kid at an arcade. We don't have a map, we don't know the routes, but hell, zombie apocalypse, right? There's no such thing as the wrong direction now. He yanked a lever, and the locomotive shuddered, wheels grinding against the rails. The cars behind us creaked, shifting their weight, and the whole world felt like it was finally moving again. Hold on, Max said, as the train began to roll north, picking up speed, cutting through the mist and into the unknown. We didn't have a plan, but we had a train, a working engine, and miles of empty track stretching ahead. A rare second chance when second chances were supposed to be impossible. For the first time in a long while, I felt hope. Not the loud kind, but the quiet, stubborn kind that sticks around long after the rest of the world falls silent.